Welcome, everybody. We have the ultimate storm guy, Brett Adair, joining us. First of all, Brett, thanks for being with us. You're at home, right now in Alabama?
Yeah, I'm at home for today, but you know how that is. It changes like by the minute.
That's a good line. Wait a minute, the weather will change, and it changes everything. First of all, I got to talk to you about your name. For years and years, as you've done storm reports, I always called you Brett Adair, because I think going out in the weather is like a dare to go and track what's happening with the weather. But it's Adair. No. Am I getting it right?
You are getting it right, and that's surprising because 99% of the people I work with get it wrong, and it's just like one of those things that flows off the tongue. So I just quit correcting it. It's just like, go with it.
I love it. So that's one portion of your name. I want to get the title right too, because in the I would say probably 80s and 90s, it was called Storm Chaser. We're seeing a transition to Storm Tracker. What do you think about the name and the description of the job title?
Oh my goodness. I'll be honest with you. I prefer meteorologist now because I went to go get that to separate myself from the storm chaser and tracker thing. And I'll tell you why. You don't, it's a great thing, but it's also a horrible thing. You don't really have to have any kind of training to become one of those two individual entities. If you decide you want to go and chase storms, you get in the truck and you take off. We took a lot of pride in, what we do and how we do it. So I wanted to make sure that I could differentiate myself when I'm out in the field, get the knowledge, the book smarts to go with, the common sense stuff, and then the visual stuff that we get to see in the field. So, I got that field meteorologist title. But Storm Chaser's the one that everybody kind of seems to sling out there. Storm Tracker's becoming more of a newer thing. So I really don't feel one way or the other about those two things. I just like my meteorologist title now.
Yeah, you earned it. You earned that. You went to Mississippi State, didn't you?
I did. I did, yes.
I loved going to, I was in state only for one semester because I took meteorology courses all across the country. I started at Portland State University, then I took at Metro State University, and then I did some of the online broadcast meteorology, and then I eventually finished the degree on campus. It was probably the most uncomfortable 9 weeks of my life down in the South in like late spring, early summer. I've never felt humidity like that before in my life.
It's literally like a swamp above the surface. I mean, when we get into the 90s here and dew points in the mid to upper 70s during that time of the year, that's usually either during or right as we end our severe weather season. Oh man, the level of discomfort here is horrible at that point.
How did you get into weather? Did you have like a weather moment in your life when you were younger? Some people say, oh, I just grew up knowing as a kid. For me, you know how I got into weather. Freeze, it's my last name. I was born this way. Eventually in college, they said you have no other choice. Freeze, go into the weather department. But what was it like for you?
Well, I had several events, luckily growing up, that were very influential in my path, I guess you would say. I was a big-time athlete early on. Baseball was my thing. That was what I was passionate about, as well as the weather. So I knew very early that I was going to do one of two things. I was either going to go play pro ball somewhere, or I was going to be doing the weather. I never envisioned doing it from the field, though. I envisioned being in front of the green screen. Down here, James Spann is the big guy. That's the guy I always grew up, watching. And, he's a staple household name here in Alabama on a local level and now nationally with the development of social media. But for me, the Superstorm in 1993 was one of the big ones that I grew up during because, I can remember that day. It was in the 70s that morning. And then I'm like, dreary, rainy, stormy afternoon, and then literally it goes to pure whiteout, and we get a couple of feet of snow in Alabama, which is, nearly unheard of here. So that was one of the things that really stuck out. And then we had several, major tornado events and hurricanes here. Opal in 1995.
Sure.
I was in the fourth grade. And I had a wonderful science teacher by the name of Danny Culp. He still he's been teaching here in my hometown is Sylacauga, which is just south of Birmingham, and he's been teaching here forever. And really, he was my first experience to go see a media operation. I was in a young astronauts program, so we were able to go and do additional things. We went to the Space and Rocket Center. We were kind of a sought-out group of young minds. Well, he also took us to the television station up here, WTVM. I think it's NBC 13 in Birmingham. Jerry Tracy was the chief meteorologist then, and he just recently retired. And that was my first experience to go in and see a media operation in the 4th grade, and it was like, wow, this is cool. This is something I want to be involved in.
It really is. It's incredible how your youth, when you get impacted like that, it steers you. It creates the opportunity in the direction that you go. I didn't grow up knowing that I wanted to be a meteorologist. I actually didn't even think about my name being connected at all. But when I think back, there were some cool storms, and I thought that weather was fascinating. But I actually wanted to be a veterinarian for a long time because I loved my cat growing up. Then beyond that, I thought maybe I would, when I realized that for veterinarians, you had to maybe give shots and things like that. I'm like, okay, maybe veterinarian's not for me. So I went into journalism. That was my first stab at school. And I was in the regular journalism program, and I wanted to be a writer, maybe for the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, something like that. And I got to the end of my communications degree, and I wanted to graduate right away. And they said, if you switch to broadcasting, that might get you out a little quicker. So I switched to broadcasting, got out of school, got the degree, and I started working at a TV station. The main meteorologist, it was a guy named David Apple in Portland, Oregon. He had to have triple bypass surgery. And I was a writer at the TV station at the time. And they said, who are we going to get to fill in to do weather? And in walked Amy Freeze. They say, Freeze, come over here. How about you fill in doing the weather? I'm like, I know nothing about the weather. That's okay. We'll teach you. So the way they taught me, Brett, you're going to die because you've been in TV stations. You know exactly. I was this newbie, rookie, whatever. On Friday and Saturday nights, after the newscast was over, they would have me stand there and talk about the weather. So I was practicing on literally the rest of the crew's time on a weekend night. It made me very unpopular from the get-go. And so then I enrolled in school. I went to Portland State University, started to get that appetite for weather, and worked on a second degree. Eventually, when I was in the East Coast in Philly, one of the benefits at NBC at the time was you could go back to school and they'd pay for it. So I looked up the most expensive school. At University of Pennsylvania, they had an environmental science degree, and that's where I got my master, was University of Pennsylvania, because they were taking the tab for me. So it's interesting how we're directed in these different paths. Tell me about your first job. Was WeatherNation your first job?
WeatherNation was my first, I guess you would say, full-time gig. I actually worked here in the Birmingham market as a kind of a general contractor for WBRC, the Fox affiliate here, for many, many years in the field. WeatherNation came around as a newer entity, and it was more of a national scope. So I was able to jump into that. I'm still involved with WeatherNation. I'm still an employee there, and as things are going on in the field, I am the field guy. So cool. I'm on television with those guys still as we deal with those bigger events. The hurricane season this year was just probably one of the more catastrophic landfall type years that we've had in a long, long time, with Helene, Milton, Beryl, even down in the islands. It's been a nasty year. So we're enjoying a little bit of a break right now, other than the lake effect season that we've had going on, which has been pretty good for those guys up in upstate New York and in western Pennsylvania already. So,
deep snow, deep snow.
Yeah, I know. Another one's going on right now. It's crazy. It's going to be a long winter, it looks like.
The Bills Mafia can handle it, but for me, I don't know if I would survive. I do not.
Maybe we need to employ them to do the cleaning of the interstates and the streets and everything else up there, because those guys get it done.
They really do. It's insane. I want to talk a little bit. You talk about Weather Nation being a field meteorologist, but you've really taken this and expanded it. Live Storms Media, you got a whole company, a whole team of people now. Take me back to some of those moments when you were just starting to get out on the ground and follow the storms. Initially, was it just very exciting and exhilarating? Was it ever scary? How did you approach some of those moments where it gets really intense?
There's a couple of moments that really stick out. I mean, so first of all, my senior trip when I graduated high school in 2004, there's a high risk in Kansas tomorrow. So we literally loaded the car up, drove to central Kansas, ended up seeing probably what I would call the most intense supercell that I've still ever seen. Produced cyclical supercell, produced almost 25 tornadoes within like a 3-hour time period. So I was kind of spoiled from the get-go when it comes to chasing out in the plains and in those areas. Luckily, I continued that path. It was a slow path. I ended up, I thought I was going to go to school to play baseball. That didn't happen. I've got an injured arm, so I couldn't do that. I was a pitcher. Still ended up taking the path through Mississippi State a little later than I would like after working for a little bit, but I continued to chase storms through that time, kind of just on my own, because honestly, until social media really exploded, you didn't know what kind of community of weather nuts were out there. This kind of just brought us all together. So the company started really in 2012 when we started watching some things. The Hattiesburg tornado that hit the University of Southern Mississippi. I had a couple of friends that were out chasing that day that I knew, and one of them ended up getting video of that tornado coming across the highway and hitting the campus. And he called and he's like, getting radar information and tells me what he's seen. He's like, what can I do with this? This is just amazing shots. And I had some contacts, and I was like, well, just let me see what I can do, because I'd sold video a lot prior to that, but I never thought about selling it for anyone else or facilitating all those needs. So that day in February of 2012 is what really brought our company about. We started that day. I think as a company we grossed, and private entities, they have to make money or they don't survive. If you want to chase storms, you've got to figure out how to fund that to make it a job. So, I think that first year we made like $12,000 as a whole, and we all know you can't survive off of that. We literally 10 times that in year 2.
Wow.
And it was like, okay, maybe we can do something with this. So I didn't take my first meteorology job until 2016. And I didn't start full-time until that period as well. I worked a full-time position working 80 hours a week at another job while starting the company.
And that's really what a lot of storm trackers do, is they've got to keep the lights on, so they keep a day job going until they can make it. And some of them don't really have that concept of how to sell. So they really need someone like Live Storms Media to be sort of a brokerage to get the visuals to meet up with the cash, if you will.
Absolutely. And we have grown from that period of time. We have grown exponentially to, we've got like 300 different videographers all over the country and in some parts of the world that submit their footage through us. And we deal with, every major media entity out there, including all of the stock video houses. If you've seen stuff, I did a Netflix show about a year and a half ago. So we did that. We're doing one with Discovery now. So many things are popping up that we just have to stay ahead of the curve, because especially with OTT platforms and live streaming platforms, and not only that, just streaming platforms in general, requests are coming left and right because we have to fill that content void, and weather is such a major way to do that. People watch weather. Everyone is more or less united these days by the weather.
I think it's also that intimacy that you provide when you give someone the images with it. It's completely changed the landscape of television, because it's bringing the storms right into people's living rooms, basically, or wherever they are, basically at their fingertips.
Right.
When you do that, when you start to bring the images, getting those images is a lot more work than people think. What is the number one tool that you're using? Are you having a meteorologist back at a home base who directs you, or do you take all your equipment with you and have a storm vehicle? How do you maneuver yourself, or some of the other stringers, I would say, that are out there? How do they make sure they get in the right spot to get the footage?
Well, that's one thing it's a very good question, because everybody, for liability reasons, I cannot and will not instruct someone to go toward a storm, right? So a lot of our people, actually all of our people, are vetted. They're already familiar with how to track storms. If we need to work on them, if we need to work on the videography skills, interviewing skills, those type of things, we can do that. But we really need the people that are going to be actively out on weather, live streaming. We need them to be able to handle the chase and to know, what they're looking at meteorologically, and then also, just geographically know what they're doing in terms of the roads. For me, I have everything built in about 3 trucks. I have 2 Suburbans and I have a Tahoe that are fully decked out. We have switchers. We have all of the cameras on board, dash camera. We've got wireless transmitters where if we need to get out and do an interview, it'll transmit directly back to the truck. We have a pipe in the vehicle now too. We've gotten with a company that gets us priority cellular signal, coupled with Starlink, coupled with microwave if we need to do that, so that we can get a beam of 25 to 50 megabits out consistently, no matter where we are.
That's more advanced than most TV stations are.
Exactly, and that's what we try to do. There are a couple of entities out there that you can directly beam a signal to, like for your live shots, etc. In our case, when we're trying to beam a signal to multiple entities, because what we do try to do on a media level, for multiple reasons, is on a more non-exclusive basis. If I do reporting, I want to do that exclusively. But if I'm shooting out the dash and, in my opinion, I've got a major tornado coming across an interstate up here, I want everybody within the industry to have access to that, or have the ability to access it, because I feel like we all are on a mission to save lives. And in that case, that shot might save lives. It might detour someone from taking a path in the direction of that tornado. So, there are things that we do provide on an exclusive level and a non-exclusive level. But yes, I have to have those pieces of equipment in my vehicle to allow me to do it. Now, most storm chasers, trackers, meteorologists will not have that technology. And it's taken me a long time to build, because the way everything is in my vehicle, I physically pay for all those things. So I own all of my own equipment. And that's how a lot of freelancers are. They own their equipment. They don't have a station backing for that per se. So it takes some time to really get to the level that we are now when it comes to tracking storms.
You talk about knowing where to go, getting in the right position, but the end game here is that you are dealing with weather. You're also dealing with destructive storms, oftentimes very dangerous situations. Sometimes these storms happen in the middle of night. Those are sometimes the most risky. What's it like for you rolling up on a storm where there's been some major damage, where transformers have blown, or maybe there's been an accident, or someone's home has been blown over? Tell me about the moments when you come into a tragic situation. You're really there for the weather. You're really there to get the images, but you've got to have some of this human interaction at the same time. What's that like?
Well, you mentioned a great point. You started in writing in the journalism side, and then you transitioned to the meteorology side. For me, you know, tracking the storms has become, I don't want to say easy. It has gotten easier with technology and, having live capabilities. The piece that I'm developing and will continue to develop is more of the journalistic side. And the reason for that is we do come up, a matter of fact, I think you and I talked pretty heavily the night Rolling Fork, Mississippi happened.
Absolutely.
And I believe I had to let you go in the middle of a live hit because we rolled up on catastrophic damage. And those are the things that make it real, right? It looks all pretty when you're chasing the storms, and then you roll up on a neighborhood that's been obliterated. And then, I've got first responder training. So we stop the chase at that point. We go directly into first responder mode because, you hear people yelling and screaming, they need help. And you're the first one on the scene in many cases. Fire, police, ambulance, none of that's there because you're on the storm. They're just at a base or somewhere waiting to hear where they need to be dispatched. So when you roll up, I've got a guy that's always with me. That's one thing. I'm not driving and texting and reporting and all that. I've got a guy in the truck driving. So then we pull off. We have to go into search and rescue mode, jump into action. And you have to let your emotions stay inside the vehicle because you're going to likely run into things that you don't need to see. You don't want to see, and most people wouldn't. We did that night. We dealt with 4 individual fatalities at the scene where we rolled up that night. And you also have to stay in the mindset because I'm going to get phone calls and I need to relay this information out to the media so that the people know, hey, upstream of the storm, this is serious. This is what's coming. We've already got, destruction. I'm not going to talk about fatalities on the air at that point, but we've got people injured and hurt, and we've got more on the way. So I've had to learn to try to do everything at one time. I've had to learn to try to be a communicator, deal with the issues of, unfortunately, injured children that we're picking up on busted tables to take to an ambulance or a sheriff's car. That night, we had to put a 7-year-old on a broken coffee table and take him to the sheriff's police car for him to rush south because we didn't have ambulances at that point in time. And that child was in a serious state, took 3 brain surgeries. He's fine today, though. He's fine. Unfortunately, his cousin didn't make it that we tried to help. She was unable to survive. So it's a lot. It really is. There's a lot more, and a lot of storm chasers don't necessarily do all of the things that I'm going to do. They may stay with the storm, and that's great. If they don't have training, they probably didn't need to stop. But for me, the human element is becoming more of a piece of my position in my job. And I don't, the dangers are there. There's dangers on the ground there, power lines, sharp objects. We have to be as careful as we can, but I put a lot of that stuff in the back of my mind and maybe risk my own safety sometimes to attempt to help other people.
Over the years, I'm sure that this has stirred you to get the first responder training, to move you in a different, put another tool on your belt. Allow you to sort of grow as a tracker, as a meteorologist in the field. But this has also become a very crowded group. I mean, when you first started, even 20 years ago, when you were coming out of school, you didn't have as many people going after the storms. You didn't have as many people looking for those pictures. Now it's become almost a traffic jam as the storms are coming, especially if it's going to be a big outbreak. And tragically, we have seen storm chasers lose their lives in these scenarios. What's it been like to see the growth of this industry?
It's a double-edged sword, Amy. It literally, It's a great thing. I love seeing so many people interested in meteorology, and recently we've had a major motion picture come out that is probably going to cause an explosion as we go into 2025 with even more people coming into the field. You're not going to be able to stop it. That's the number one thing with the technology that has evolved, which is wonderful and a curse. It's allowed everybody to have access at their fingertips to weather information. Now, the biggest problem that I can foresee is a couple of things. One, do they know how to interpret the information that they have? When you're in a situation, as we are in cases, that could be life and death when you're in front of these destructive storms, is that cell phone signal working? Is that radar image 15 minutes old? Those are all things that you have to have in the back of your mind. The most catastrophic piece that I see coming from this, the possibility of accidents on the road and log jams and traffic with a major tornado coming into an area. It's gotten worse year after year. To be quite candid, I stay on dirt roads more than I'm on paved roads out in the plains. Those aren't maintained as well, but I've got to make sure that my vehicle, has the proper tires. It's 4-wheel drive. That's the reason I've built my own trucks, because we basically try to get away from most of the traffic, which will be on your paved roads. Most people don't want to dare try to get out on those roads because that clay out there in Oklahoma, I can promise you, I dealt with it in May and I got stuck, and it's going to happen. But I feel better with my odds of being out of the traffic and going one-on-one with the storm than I do being in a line of traffic because someone's gotten a bumper-to-bumper accident that's 3 miles long with a supercell approaching, and I have no options.
Right. Yeah, it's just an interesting way that it's grown. And as you say, it's a double-edged sword. There are positives, blessing and a curse, because more people are out there looking. It's a fascination with weather. Also, people, when they see the weather and they can see how dangerous it is, it makes them take things more seriously. So that's all, you take what you can with that hand in glove. But at the same time, we have seen deaths from it. You've seen more problems. It's not as easy as it looks, is the bottom line. It's not as safe as it looks. No. This will be interesting to you. I have not done a ton of storm chasing as far as tornadoes go. Definitely covered my fair share of hurricanes on the coastlines over the years. But when I was in Denver, Colorado, Eastern Plains of Colorado, right? This is almost a tornado alley of its own. We actually used the helicopter. Isn't this interesting? We knew we knew the storms were coming, and we would jump into the helicopter and go out. Not only would we track the storm, a lot of the Eastern Plains of Colorado is farm country. We would actually land the helicopter, and if it had ruined someone's fields or their home or whatever, we'd get out, we'd interview them, et cetera. So we were using helicopters at that time. Now, fast forward here 20 years, what do you think drones will do to storm chasing? Have you utilized drones a lot? I know you've used them because I've seen you use in post-storm and damage, but what about the actual coverage of storms?
Oh, absolutely. We captured, some of the newer technology. We captured the first drone tornado live. So, yeah, we have captured 4 or 5 tornadoes with the drone as they happen. We did stuff during hurricanes. We also, to my knowledge, I have the first known 360 video. I had a 360 camera of a tornado in Arkansas back in like 2016, 2017 timeframe. So we've been, again, we have to be forward with technology. We've got to try to be ahead of the technological game because drones are massive in everything now, from search and rescue to the aftermath, because, hey, it's a lot cheaper for me to put a 45-minute battery in my drone than it is to crank the helicopter up and take it up over the damage site now. Oklahoma, Colorado, Kansas, and Texas, I think, were some of the states, several of the primary severe weather states, that did a lot of the chasing by the air, which that is the coolest thing ever. We've done it in a plane before, a Cessna. Wasn't the wisest thing, but we'll probably do it again. Simply because I like to do it. I like the different perspectives. I like to learn, the positives, the negatives, and the roads now literally are a huge negative. I wish maybe one day I can hit the lotto and get a helicopter here and just start using it, on these chases. But the drones are going to be huge. They already are. I can only imagine the type of advancements, because over the period of time that we've had, either the consumer or prosumer type drones, we've already seen massive advances in the camera capabilities. I'm just curious to see what's next.
Yeah, to see what's next is true. As I let you go here, I have to ask you about this. With technology, there's a lot of fakes out there. How do you tell the difference? If someone's coming to you as a brokerage and say, I got some amazing video, how do you tell the difference between the fakes and the reals?
I want to see the raw video. I don't want to see, in most of those cases when you've got like AI and such involved, you're going to see that in a like the MP4 WMV type of format. I want to see the raw video from the camera, and if I have any questions, I'll say, hey, do me a favor, flip the camera open, hit the play button on it so that I can see it on your physical camcorder that you shot it with, because you're right, that's going to be a huge problem. That's a big problem. In my opinion, this is where, you know this better than anyone, in newsrooms today, we're pushing UGC, UGC, UGC. It's like you get a
user-generated content. Yeah, UGC, right. User-generated content. They want it for free.
You get a pat on the back for that if you get that content that's really great, and that's wonderful. There's a couple of issues with that. AI, fake content. There's been a lot of pictures and hurricanes that have floated around that have been fakes, and we've seen some major entities get duped by the fakes. The other issue is copyright infringement. You don't know if that account that uploaded that piece of content is the owner of the piece of content. And the problem with that is, if that content gets registered with the U.S. Copyright and Trademark Office, guess who's on the hook for it?
You get burned.
It does not matter if it's a fake account. They're going to tell you should have done your due diligence and investigated that. And that's the reason that our entity, where we're vetting our people, we feel like that we hold that value, and it's a valuable entity and will be going forward because of those type of issues.
It'll be an interesting road ahead. I really appreciate you taking the time. So fascinated to talk to you about the behind the scenes of live storms media, and also getting to know you just a little bit better. Brett Adair, thanks for being on Thin Ice. I appreciate it.
Thanks. We'll have to drag you to the plane soon.
Absolutely.